Welcome to Church 3.0, presented by Apollos, a podcast where we explore the nuances of modern Christian culture and the challenges of cultivating community while maintaining impact and relevance in the church. Join Tyler Vance, COO of Apollos, as he talks to church leaders from around the world to gain a deeper understanding of the Christian faith in a modern context. Push boundaries, change lives, create a more hopeful future.
Hey, welcome today, guys. Man, we have such an episode for you today. Buckle up, get ready. We have so much to cover. I want to introduce and thank Dr. Warren Bird for being a part of our podcast today. If you are not familiar, Warren, you are the author of over 35 books in the church space. You were the preeminent voice as the church led into multi-site. You have been an ancillary figure in seeing what God has been doing across multiple generations of pastors, of church leaders, and of expressions of the local church. And you have the data to back it up. Such a unique voice in the space, someone that I'm honored for you guys to get to hear from today. Thank you for joining us, Warren. And guys, we have so much to cover today. Buckle up. Like I said, we're going to get rolling really quick. But Warren, thank you again for joining us.
Well, it's a privilege, and we prayed and committed that God would be the teacher in this. And I have to warn you that I come out on the hope side. There's all kinds of bad news that we could talk about, but there's so much good in what God is doing and how churches are reaching out. So let's zero in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the key things that you have coming up is your church study, which happens every 5 years. The last one was in 2025 or 2020, sorry, the large church study. And so now you're getting ready to launch the study for 2025. We're at that year mark. What are you hoping to learn? What are some of the things that are things that you're really listening for as you go into the next version of the study?
Well, as this is being recorded or broadcast, it will have just launched. And so if you're hearing this anytime between now and I'll tell you our cutoff date, which we want advertised, but I'm going to say it here, is November 12th, 2025. Okay. Please go to bit.ly/largechurch2025 and tell us your experiences. Now, to your question, what are we trying to track? There are all kinds. I mean, what has happened since the pandemic?
Oh my gosh!
Have larger churches, which were the first to close and the longest to close, have they made a comeback? How have they changed in their outreach? What seems to be the most fruitful? What about community impact, for example? How is that different? Yeah. All kinds of dynamics of what's happening, the kind of the state of the larger church today, what's happening. And actually, this survey is not only longitudinal, but it's part of a series that every size church is going to be asked questions. And if you, so we'll take ours and then add it into all the other surveys and be able to say, here's a picture of 2025, the American Protestant Church. And it will be groundbreaking what we find.
It has been every time you've done it, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And one of the things, as I led data at Life Church, one of the things that we said consistently is that any single data point is really invaluable. But when you put a data point over time, it becomes incredibly valuable very quickly. And so I love what you're doing of data points of the local church over time. Now, one of the stats that you shared is in 2020, over 90% of large churches made small groups central to discipleship. What do you think 2025 will look like in that data point over time?
Well, to make that more fun, As you mentioned, this survey started in the year 2000. So 2000, 05, 2010, 2015. That percentage has
Yeah.
inched up until in 2020, 90% said their small groups are, quote, central to our strategy of spiritual um, nurture and formation, which,
Hmm.
we worded that in a way of talking discipleship across all context.
Sure.
And you don't get 90% of anything. So I'm not thinking it's going to now, hit 100%, because when they first started taking the survey, it was at 50, right around 50%. So this has
Wow.
been a dramatic jump. But what we're learning is churches with high percentages of their people in small groups just are more spiritually vital on a whole bunch of levels.
Mm.
That it tends to, there's more inviting going on, there's more volunteering, there's more financial giving, there's more lay leadership. This is in any number of ways we're able to say,
Yeah.
the higher the percentage of your church of your adults in small groups, the healthier and more vital and more outreach focused the church tends to be. And that's very
That's
encouraging.
that's incredibly encouraging. I think it tracks with the words of Jesus, right? I think it tracks with the life he modeled of community. So I mean, I will throw the spiritual in there. What are some of the surprising things you saw out of 2020 that you're actually tracking or looking for into 2025?
Well, that was definitely one of the highlights.
Yeah.
Succession readiness, we ask about, and the question is kind of like, for where your senior pastor's life stage is, what
Mm,
is the succession readiness level? And it's like a 5-point scale. And yes, that implies retirement, but it also implies, if there were to be a transition, because God does call people into other ministries, other churches, how ready are you? I talked with a church this week that the pastor sadly was diagnosed with a very life-threatening illness, and the
mm,
question was, how's the succession plan? And they were like, it was the pastor, the executive pastor, and the board chair, and they were like, yeah, we've been meaning to work on the succession plan.
yeah.
So that's something that we want to keep gauging, and I hope continues to go up.
Yeah.
I could rattle off any number of metrics that we're going to look at and say, okay, how did that change? And hopefully it's changing in a healthier way.
Yeah. What you had shared on our previous conversation how churches are rethinking spiritual formation, and you're really kind of cluing into that as well. I mean, obviously you talk small groups or you know central to being a part of spiritual formation. What are the other things that churches are doing as a rethink, you know, spiritual formation beyond what has classically been just content or attendance?
Well, if the pandemic taught us anything, it's that just having a big crowd does not equal discipleship happening.
Mm,
Or to flip it around, it's kind of like one of the analogies I heard during the pandemic is, what if can you still play chess if you don't have your queen? So the Hebrews
ooh,
10:25 of, the forsake not assembling of yourselves together, that couldn't have, by the way, that verse then talks about encouragement. So if those gatherings, whether big, small, any kind of size, need to lead towards people walking away encouraged in their
yeah,
faith and in their growth and in their witness. But but when that happened, the challenge was, well, can discipleship still occur when we are, in some cases, legally prohibited from gathering
yeah.
together? And the answer was yes, which caused people to say, well, maybe we're making unhealthy assumptions that that attendance is the queen, is the key thing. Maybe we need to look at related standards like engagement, which would
Mm.
manifest itself by attendance, but would manifest itself in other ways as well, such as community group life, uh, volunteering, serving, giving, inviting others, leading in a lay capacity, and so forth. So the
Yeah.
metrics are broadening on the one hand. On another hand, the metrics are moving online. So
Mm.
how many pieces of spirituality, whether it's my wife and I just led a marriage class. We started in person, but we did all the sessions online because couples, they plopped their kids in bed, hoped the kids stayed in bed, plopped on the sofa next to each other and tuned in. They couldn't have gotten a sitter and gotten out and done it every night. And then
Yeah.
we had a happily ever after gathering in person when it was all over. But that weaving together of the in-person and the online, whether it's the prayer request, prayer chain online, or anything else, how do you do genuine spiritual growth just as meaningfully online as in person? And how can the two weave together is a whole new dimension that a lot of large churches are pioneering their explorations in how to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at Apollos, our day to day is that very thing of how to weave that. And Darren Yates at Crossroads, we actually released a podcast earlier this year with him where he talks about how they think about the in-person room and digital and how they complement each other. So they have a really unique approach to that. So we're definitely, I would say, seeing that play out and seeing some really powerful things from that. I mean, we're looking at stats right now where, if someone gives or if someone prays for other people in our expression of the apps that we provide for churches, they're 2 times more likely to give. If they practice gratitude as a act of a daily habit, they're 3 times more likely to get engaged in a next step. I mean, we're seeing this data kind of transform, the journeys and pathways of people in their spiritual transformation. So one of the things I'm looking forward to is seeing how that broadens to other church thought processes. So yeah,
Great. Go Apollos.
yeah, I'm no, I'm super excited for the survey that you're doing because it allows us to build better products for the local church. It allows the local church to understand what is working, what is not working, what needs to change. You talk about coming out of COVID, like we changed a whole lot. And I'm also interested to see what shrunk back from that change. What are the lessons we learned? What
And
are
if I
the
can just insert a parenthesis, so please jot down or open in your browser bit.ly/Large Church 2025, all one word, and
yes.
tell us your experience. It's worth the time. You get to be the first to hear the findings. You get to have your own Q&A with the
Ooh,
data scientist and a very impressive advisory panel. Just this morning, Sam Chand, as one of them, said, hey, count me in to be part of that Q&A webinar. So
love it.
so participate, learn, and share your experience, and then see how that compares and benchmarks against others.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You talked about succession plans, but you've also said one of the most effective years, according to data, for a senior pastor is year 16.
Well,
That feels
let's
a little bit counterintuitive.
let's nuance that.
Okay.
First, in terms of a church's growth,
Yes.
years 5 to 19 are the peak growing years on average. Now, I want to
Yeah.
commission everyone on this podcast. Please be Mr. or Mrs. Edison and invent the light bulb. Be the exception. Be the, as in the words of my friend William Vanderbloemen's latest book, be the unicorn. Make the difference. But that's what the numbers say. Another set of numbers say, in terms of when you rate spiritual vitality of a church being at its highest, And then when you correlate that with the number of years the senior pastor has served, that's between 5 and 15 is the range. When you boil down all of we turned about 7 different metrics against senior pastor age. We somewhat arbitrarily said it looks like year 16 of the senior pastor is the peak, but that doesn't mean it needs to go downhill after that. There are plenty of things that you can do to keep growing, keep being vital, keep raising the bar of discipleship, and seeing what God will do. It just means, are you building a team? Are you passing the baton at different levels as you mature in your leadership in a particular church? And again, this is just limited to large churches, and we're defining large churches as in-person attendances of 1,000 and up. And yes, there are studies of every other size church. And so that enables us to say, like pastor age or anything else, how does that change, or does it change with church size?
Yeah, no, I love it. I love the conversation around it. And this is a great thing about data, Warren. It is the beginning of the conversation, right? And a good mentor of mine and friend, Kevin Penry, which we both know, I think I will give him credit for, I'm not sure if this is true, but he coined the phrase, data has a seat at the table. The Holy Spirit is still the head of the table.
I love that picture, because I recently read through the book of Acts in my own personal devotions, and I was moved by 2 things. One, 2 of the things I was moved by. I'm always moved by a lot of things when you read the book of Acts. But one is how sensitive the Apostle Paul and others were to the promptings of the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
But also how they used information to say, well, this is happening over there, and therefore God wants us to, or we need to speak to, or we need to do the following. So as they had data in their day, and they made data-informed decisions, so likewise today, there's always a degree of data information, or Kevin Penry's metaphor of seat at the table, one of the seats at the table, for your decision making. And we're hoping by your participation in the survey to get good data, put it back in your hands, and enable you to dream greater dreams, take greater steps of boldness. And in a lot of ways, okay, I'll be frank. People read these surveys. Why do they read the surveys? They want to know, am I alone? Are we unique? We banged against this door and are having a hard time. Oh, everybody else is too.
Everyone else is. Yep.
Then we'll keep banging against that door. Or, man, this just opened up. Is God up to something? And then you read the stats and say, oh, it's opening up for a lot of people. Well, God is up to something, which then just encourages you to push all the more.
Well, one of the things that you said in our prep conversation, and it resonates so deeply with me, is the ability to shift from anecdotal to data informed decisions. Where are you seeing, I mean, in the life cycle of the local church, I think we're probably more leaning into data informed decisions than we ever have. Maybe not. But I do believe that is still a journey to go on as a pastor, is what do I feel about this situation versus what does the data tell me? What are the success stories, or what are you seeing? How do people get to that from one place to the other? How do they do that well?
Let me give 2 illustrations. First, I have a lot of gray hair, which means I've been around for a long time. Excuse me. And the first church that I pastored was a church plant. And I was just beating myself up that we had learned that like only 1 out of 3 people who visited came back and made it the church home. And I'm like, what is the matter with us? And then I read this little ratio book by Win Arn, and it said something like either 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5 is the national norm. And all of a sudden I went from feeling, oh, that's terrible, to, well, God, you're up to something. And I don't, what we're doing seems to be working in that area so we can push on other areas. And that was data that helped me. Now, carry it another way. The most recent book that I co-authored is called Becoming a Future Ready Church. And it's all about 8 forks in the road that every church has to deal with between now and, we say 2050, but it's really much sooner. Major shifts, like moving from attendance to attachment. There's a world of difference between focusing on um, bodies in the pew to people. You don't want people to say, well, I'm a member, but I just don't feel like I belong at this
Yeah.
church. Whoa, there's a big disconnect. And that kind of disconnect is growing. So anyway, the book is about forks in the road. And it says, take the data, and we lace each book with all kinds of graphs about,
Sure.
what's happening, and take multiple generations, especially including the younger rising generation, and talk through what does it mean for us as a church. And then we give questions to guide. So basically I'm saying 82% means nothing uh, until you say, so what are the implications, if any, for our church, and what action does God want us to take together as a church going forward?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that kind of group discussion among generations is usually the best context. And if you can't get multiple generations, do it as a team or a board or a staff to be able to say, okay, here's the data. Now,
Yeah.
what does that mean? Is that our experience? Is it accurate? What are the implications for what steps God is calling us perhaps to take?
Yeah, I love that because and so oftentimes I it feels like we are, litmus testing our success against others. And I love what you just said. There are different expressions of the local church. There's different things that God has put in the hearts of the shepherds, of pastors, of local churches, right? And so it's how do you use the data to be authentic to the thing that God has called you to? It's not the expression that everyone else has. But then when you find that thing, measure it and measure it well and measure it often
And
and
benchmark
really,
against yourself, or your church against itself, to say, this year, what percent of apprentice leaders do we have? How does that compare to last year? What's our goal for next year? What are the steps we can take to increase the number of leaders in training, apprentice leaders, uh,
yeah,
in our church? And what gets rewarded gets measured, what gets cheered gets measured, what gets spotlighted happens. So if that's what God is calling you to do, have a pathway to get there. Set a pathway,
yeah,
take steps.
yeah. Which is it's an emerging Warren, it's an emerging generation of pastors and church leaders that are still figuring out how to do that, are still bringing data into the equation. And the episode that's dropping right before this is my good friend Amber Smart of Smart Metrics. She is a leading voice
Actually,
in
it's
data
out. I listened
analytics.
to it already.
Yes. Yes, she's a leading voice of data analytics, and what she shares many of the same things as you. So we got a really cool back to back here, but it is the learn to measure, and that is a new muscle to build into memory for many pastors.
Tyler, that's a really good phrase, new muscle, because it implies it's one of many muscles, and it also implies it's a good thing
Yes.
to measure, and especially to measure the right things.
What as you're looking through and I mean the large church survey is coming out.
Yes.
And I'll
And
say
if
it
we
again.
did we say please participate in this at
Participate bit.ly slash large church 2025
Correct.
if you didn't get that. But you've also done some other recent surveys and studies about churches. You're constantly doing this. What is some of the data that's surprising you, or maybe even changed for you the way you understood what is currently happening in the local church?
Mm. I- that's we. I want to say, well, how long do you have for us to talk about that? Um, One of the things that I like to do is myth busting. Um,
Oh,
and there's myth busting with the general public. For example, when you see articles in the newspaper about a megachurch, they inevitably use an adjective like rich megachurch or worse. And is that true that large churches keep all the money inside the walls? And just by the way, resoundingly no. Um, and is that true that the one example of a highly paid senior pastor who lives an extravagant lifestyle that makes it into the media or wears sneakers that are of an exorbitant cost or whatever, is that the norm? And it's not. And by the way, I ribbed my pastor. I'm part of a church plant today as a layperson who had
yeah.
new shoes, and he said, I got them on sale for $79. And I said, so you don't qualify for preacher sneakers. Like, anyway, um, is that the norm or the exception? And by the way, it's by far the exception. But this is what,
Yeah.
hypocrisy. Jesus started with that. That was his big beef, and the public has had a beef with that ever since. Are we living out what we say? Are
Mm,
churches making a difference in terms of their uh, impacting the poor and needy around them? And the answer is yes. And again, my focus
yeah.
for this study is large churches. That's not to say that on any of these things, other churches aren't doing it too. But since the big church gets picked on, I'm going to give big church responses to say no, no, no. Now, but inside the big church, there are also stereotypes that need busting, myths.
Mm,
One example is, well, how, if we're transparent about the finances, um, you know, why should we be? We're accountable only to God. Well,
yeah.
besides being able to give you some Bible verses like 2 Corinthians 8 and 9 and elsewhere that may encourage a degree of transparency, I can tell you research wise that the more you do things like, I'm going to say the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability, ECFA, has 7 standards. The more you live by their standards of having a independent board or a degree of transparency and all, I've documented research wise, the more generous your people are because there's a higher trust level and a
Mm,
confidence level among them to say, okay, I know the money's really going there. I know the church is transparent about it. And especially today, 20, 30 years ago, you assumed that the money was going to where the church is said. Today's person approaches with skepticism to say, yeah, I'm sure.
yeah.
And so going that extra degree to communicate, be financially transparent, and to be above board, squeaky clean in your integrity has just a ripple effect across the church. And that's statistics that we can bring in to help encourage leaders that, if you will, integrity pays off.
Huh.
Who would have
We
thought that?
I will give Bobby credit for this. Bobby Greenwald. He said churches operate in the commodity of trust.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, Life Church, where Bobby is part of, is ECFA accredited.
Yes, we were very stringent on our ECFA accreditation standards, all the way to every single team member. And I have nothing but great stuff to say. That is an organization that behind the scenes looks the same as it does out in front on paper. And so nothing but great stuff to stay there. What are the church leaders' responses you're finding as you're kind of introducing some of the new data, the blending of the hybrid, the community groups, the really emerging landscape change of the local church in the way. And let me say that I'm gonna preface my question in a way that the front door might be changing locations.
Mm, mm. Well, we don't need this year's survey. Where I haven't had looked at one survey response yet, and I am very eager to start peaking as soon as we get a few hundred to go. But this podcast is launching the day after the survey
Yep.
launches. So I've been restraining myself. But
I'm trying to get you there. Okay.
yes, and thank you for all the people listening who will participate anytime between now and November 12th when we close. But one of the things that I'm sorry, now having given that spiel, refresh me on your question.
What are you seeing from a trend, or how are pastors responding? And these are my words, not yours, but to the front door location
Yes, sorry.
changing in
Okay.
the local
So,
church. Yeah.
so without this survey, we already know that people check out churches of all sizes and form their first impression before even getting there. That the front door of the church has moved from the front door, from the parking lot, which is where it was before that, the friendliness, the ease, is this going to be a good experience for
Sure.
us, all the way to my private home or workplace or anywhere else where I have peeked at the website, and About Us or equivalent is the most visited page. There's usually something about the pastor. They'll often listen to a sermon or two, look at a worship service, and then that means that when they come, that's almost like the equivalent of a second visit or more, to say, I have a real interest here. So then is the church, really pushish this, oh, don't do anything, don't, or are they like, hey, your presence here says you would like more of God. You would like to perhaps connect with the Christian community, and we want to let you kick the tires, test the water, but let us show you lots of ways that can happen here.
Mm.
So the
Love it.
whole assimilation connection process is changing, and I always marvel at how many people are willing to give their cell phones. I had just taken a friend to church with me. He comes from a Muslim background. He was a believer, but he is a believer, but his whole demeanor, says I'm a little different from the makeup of the congregation. And yet, when the delightfully friendly greeter at the information table said, "Oh, just give us your number, let us," he popped open his cell phone. So I was like, well, let me get your cell phone number while we're at it. So the comfort that people have in coming to church, they're making a statement, and they're often opening the door to say, I would like some degree of follow-up. Now, some are, want to stay distant, anonymous, and many times people don't do that first time here, a QR code or whatever. And notice all the online references that we've used already, and just integrating physical with in person. But that whole, how do I get people connected, whether they're first time online or first time in person, is a big new challenge. The equation has changed.
I think it's a hopeful equation, though, and I have great hope for it. And I've often shared this story as a parent of teenagers. Their entire existence is a digital first existence. And I laugh as a parent, even down to, we live in the same neighborhood as friends that they went to Mother's Day out with. And there's no going and knocking on the door anymore. It's texting. I'm going to text them, and I'm going to digitally interact and break that connection there. And they'll still find themselves on a bike together somewhere, but they don't go and knock on the door anymore. And it's a very strange thing to walk through as a parent. And I share that very often as my reframing that I'm getting to live in the middle of watching a generation of people interact differently with each other, and therefore they will with the local church as well.
And the God who invented electrons knew all about the ways that we were going to creatively reach not only our neighbor across the street, which is still desperately needed, love your neighbor as yourself, but we have the potential to reach people anywhere in the world, which is all the more exciting.
Yes. let me finish. We're gonna wind down our time. I told you guys buckle up. This is like we have 30 things we could still talk about, Warren, and probably we should have recorded our pre-conversation just as much as this. But what gives you hope right now when it comes to the future of the local church?
Well, one of the myths, again, I'm going to go to the larger church because that's the focus of this survey and of this conversation. One of the myths is that larger churches are a baby boomer phenomenon. And yes, many boomers started, but many younger pastors are starting churches that grow larger. And a church tends to be the senior pastor's age minus about 5 years. So a younger pastor equals a younger congregation. And I am just thrilled by whether it's an older pastor with a sizable young adults group or
Yeah.
a younger pastor where the whole congregation tends to be younger, plus a few gray-haired parents who got in for the ride. I'm very encouraged that the amount of youth represented in larger churches, again, that being our focus for this and the
Yeah.
series of studies, is very unlike the average church in the United States and is very encouraging. The spiritual receptivity of people who don't come from a churched background. Again, today, the majority of Americans still identify with the Christian faith, even those who say they're nuns, which
Yeah.
is no religious preference, generally had some kind of Christian exposure. And now instead of saying, well, you can't really talk to me because I'm a blank, they're saying I'm a nothing, which to me is one less barrier for reaching people. One of the charts in the book, Becoming Future Ready Church, talks about from the GSS, the General Social Survey of the United States, which is the general public, which
Yeah.
is one of the most reliable surveys out there, talks about, yes, they do ask spiritual questions on that year after year. And one of them is, do you believe in God or a higher power? So if you lump everybody together who at least agrees with the awareness of a supernatural higher power piece, that percentage is high. It's generally in the upper 70s or 80 percentiles. And B, that has not gone down with all the
No.
nuns and rise and media love of focus on people who have rejected the Christian faith. There's still a lot of people who say, I know there's something out there. And like the Apostle Paul on Mars Hill, we get to say, well, may I present that God to you and tell you all about him and invite you to go on a journey in with some of his people.
Yeah. I love that. And you've referenced one of my favorite Bible passages that has been formative in the shaping um, for myself personally. So thank you for that. You weren't aware of that, but my heart pitter pattered anytime uh, that scripture gets referenced. So yes, I am hopeful for the local church. I see a rise in personal evangelism. I see a rise in curiosity. I see a rise in comfort for others wanting to be invited in. And I see opportunity for local churches to provide deeper experiences to be known and needed. And so I would 1,000% agree with you on that from what I'm getting to see in the seat that I sat in, but also from the experience of my neighbors and presenting the gospel to them and sharing in community with them as they are in journey on that process. And so, wow, uh, the bride of Christ, the local church, is the hope of the world. It is the introduction to a Jesus that changes everything. And so, data has a seat at the table. Warren, thank you for being a continuing voice of data going, how might we as a local church continue to serve the mission with precision, with excellence, with a heart that listens to where the Holy Spirit is moving and moving in alignment with Him. Thank you
Well, Tyler,
for
you
your
said it.
service to the local church.
You said it well, and this has been a little awkward of a conversation in that we've learned a lot from previous surveys, and we can tease that, and I can certainly make those surveys findings available. But really, 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 we want to know what's happening right now. And the good news is, I'm not going to hoard it. I want to give it back to everybody who fills out the
Absolutely.
survey, whatever size church you are. Just get to the end and where you give your name and email and say, yes, I want to be included. And we'd love to tell you what's happening. But especially if your church is somewhere between 1,000 and 100,000 in in-person attendance, please tell us your experience, especially.
And we will put the link in the description. We will plaster it everywhere. We want you guys to be a part of it, to both to learn for yourself and to help others. Warren, you shared such a personal experience of even as a pastor going, hey, am I doing a great job or not? Oh, I am doing a great job. We hope that encouragement comes to each of you that fill out a survey to do that. Warren, I have a couple. I like to end with some quick fire questions. What's a book you recommend to church leaders regularly?
Now, I'm not being facetious, but the Bible. I'll
Sure.
give you another one too. But it's so easy not to read the Bible when we're in leadership. And I can tell you from other stories that wherever you are in leadership, that daily time in the Word, there's no substitute for having opportunity to listen to God. Now, having said that, of course, you Google me for book titles, but let me tell you one of my favorites, Dave Ferguson's Exponential. Basically, the logic is your life in Christ one worth reproducing? If so, can you reproduce it in one person? If so, can you reproduce it in 10 people through a group? If so, can you reproduce it through 100 people through a series of groups? If, kind of how do you reproduce yourself with an apprentice at each step, all along the way? And to me, that's the heart of 2 Timothy 2:2, where we have 4 generations. The things, Paul speaking to Timothy, the things you've heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, commit to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others. That's so important in our discipleship.
I love it. What's the most underutilized question in church surveys?
I'm what's called quantitative, in that I want to know, okay, how often does the average person come? And that's a helpful number to know. But then everybody, no matter what I find on what topic, their question is, why? And I'm like, well, I needed to know the number before I could then dig, or I needed to know that this was an important thing before I can dig underneath. So I learned an interview for then the qualitative, which is the interview, focus group type open-ended question.
Yeah.
I learned from David Brooks, whatever you think of him as a writer, he's an outstanding interviewer, not to ask, why do you feel that way? Or why is that? But how did you come to that view or experience? And in a survey, you get at the why by hearing the story of how someone got there. And that, to me, has been an invaluable interview technique and a good way for whatever you're asking to angle your survey when you do have an open-ended question that way.
Yeah, that's golden. Thank you, Warren. Thank you for the investment today. Thank you for taking a minute out of a very busy schedule as you are working to ramp up a massive survey to spend some time with us. Once again, please fill out the survey. You can find it at bit.ly/large church 2025, all one word. And please be a part of it, be a part of the story of the local church, and add your voice into it because it matters. Warren, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm sure with all the notes that we did not cover today, that we might have a chance at a follow-up conversation. But I look forward to that. And if you stay tuned, Daniel, who you referenced, you guys book together, Daniel's episode will be coming out here this fall as well.
Daniel,
And so we got some time with him.
He is
And
quite the interviewer. Listen to him more than me.
so we've got a lineup ready to go. Warren, thank you again, and I appreciate your investment in the local church and the voice. It has shaped a generation, and so I appreciate that.
Well, Tyler, it was delightful to chat today. Thank you very much, and God's best to you and Apollos.
Yeah, thank you guys. Have a great day.
All right, bye-bye.